BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
The look on Ian Maxwell's face was similar to the permanent look on Kingsley's face, actually. It's just like, what? What is going on?
Hello and welcome to a special bonus edition of the Scottish Football Podcast. I'm Jonathan Sutherland. Today I'm joined by the artist David Shrigley, who's most famous in Scottish football as the creator of Kingsley, the Partick Thistle mascot. David Shrigley became a Partick Thistle fan after attending Glasgow School of Art and spending 27 years in Scotland's largest city. His seemingly simple line drawings, often accompanied by humorous captions, have made him world famous. He was nominated for the 2013 Turner Prize, and he can count Andy Murray as one of his many fans. In our podcast, David reveals the inside story behind the creation of Kingsley, why he's drawn towards Partick Thistle and Scottish football. Plus, could there be artistic possibilities ahead with Scotland at Euro 2024?
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
Well, David, I suppose for some football fans who aren't au fait with the art world, your work has been described as absurd, profane, anarchic and joyful. You're also, of course, famously the creator of Kingsley. These terms I've just used, anarchic, absurd, profane, joyful, they could also be applied to Scottish football, I guess. Do you see a lot of parallels?
Yes. Yeah, I think that being a Partick Thistle fan, it feels like an extension of the humour of the west of Scotland, you know, that kind of strange gallows humour. I think all football fans feel that, you know, football is some sort of terrible torture that offers a very singular position in their lives. But yeah, I think Partick Thistle and their fan base are, for me, very synonymous with that sort of strange comedy of life in the west of Scotland.
You are from Macclesfield originally, but you spent 27 years in Glasgow School of Art. How did, I guess, your association with Partick Thistle begin?
Well, I grew up supporting Nottingham Forest because I was born in Macclesfield, but I grew up in the East Midlands, and I followed Forest for most of my life. But I lived in Leicester. I went to school in Leicester, and they're the arch rivals of Nottingham Forest. So I made a decision when I was 8 or 9 years old to support Forest. And this was terrible. It was a terrible idea because I was just completely ostracised at school and had to have this follow my team in secrecy, really. And then when I moved to Glasgow when I was 19 to study at the art school, it was suddenly okay to say that you were a Nottingham Forest fan. So people would, oh yeah, you know, famous Scottish players of the past that were in the Forest team in the glory days, like John Robertson and Archie Gemmell, Kenny Burns, legends. So anyway, that was okay. And then I realised that I never actually went to see Forest that often because it was the dark days of football in the late 70s and 80s, and it was a bit scary. My mum wouldn't let me go all the way to Nottingham on my own. So once I was an adult, when I got to Glasgow, I decided I could go and watch football matches alone, and it was fine. And I guess Partick Thistle I always lived in the West End, so Partick Thistle was the one team you could actually walk and go and see. And obviously it's a non-partisan choice, which makes it attractive for the outsider or for the newbie in Glasgow. So yeah, I just started going along. I think the first game I went to was 1989, maybe. And I remember that Bobby Smith was still playing for Partick Thistle right at the end of his career because he played for Leicester, and I remembered him with his curly brown afro at the time and his moustache. He was a bit of a throwback type footballer to the sort of early 80s, 70s.
It's a shame moustaches have kind of fallen by the wayside in a lot of football.
Yeah, it is. We bemoan the moustache, but they come back every November for the Movember thing.
True.
Not being a moustache wearer myself, I admire them on other men and other footballers. Yeah. Anyway, this all started in 1989, and I guess, to be honest, I was in the 1990s, I was literally a fair weather Partick Thistle fan, in the sense that I didn't go when it was raining. And then I think once I left arts, well, I had left art school at the beginning of the 90s, and then it got to the noughties, and I started going a lot more often. I think I started just to embrace the fact that I had a local team and I could walk there every Saturday and go and see the games. And I think at that point in my life, when I got into my 30s, I sort of gave myself license to be a football fan, because being an artist and being, growing up, being an art student, it was in the 1980s, it wasn't cool to be a football fan. And it was something that you had to hide somehow, or I felt like, and it didn't really become cool, or it didn't really become socially acceptable in my friendship group until like Fantasy Football League was on television. And then suddenly that lads culture became a thing that was okay. And it actually kind of annoyed me, to be honest, because being a football fan, as we all know, is like a lifelong personal penance. But anyway, I started to embrace just the fact that I could go every week and see what became my team. And I guess my passion for Partick Thistle sort of oscillated a bit, in the sense that there was always, before the playoffs were introduced in the second tier, it would often get to just after Christmas and you'd feel like we're not going to go up, we're not going to go down, and there really isn't anything to play for. And that seemed to happen quite a lot. And then it was always tempered by Forest's fortunes as well, where they had a similar thing where they'd be sort of mid-table. And then some seasons I'd be really into Partick Thistle's fortunes, and not really care that much about Forest, because I knew nothing was going to happen to them. They weren't going to exit the division by the top or the bottom. So, and then the whole thing of becoming involved with the club happened very much by accident.
I just wanted to just touch on what you were saying there about artists and football, because nowadays there seems to be a kind of cool link almost between artists in Scotland to an extent and football. Douglas Gordon, Berlin-based Scottish artist, he did the Zidane film maybe 15 odd years ago. You got Craig Black, Greenock-based artist, who does kind of weird and wonderful things with actual footballs, and that's taken him around the world and seems to be very lucrative for him as well. I've been intrigued by your art for a while, David, obviously, ever since kind of Kingsley came on the scene 9 years ago. There's a sort of gritty cheerfulness, or, it would be my crude way of describing your kind of line drawings, which you've become famous for, and the captions that go with it that kind of are kind of funny, subversive, kind of catch you off guard. And I just think, with Partick Thistle, there's a sort of an edginess there. You once described Partick Thistle as the thinking football fan's choice in Glasgow. And I guess from what you're saying, it's not the mainstream with Rangers and Celtic. I guess as an artist, are you always looking for that kind of edge? And Partick Thistle kind of feeds into that a little bit, because they're always on the edge, it feels like, in terms of trying to get back into the big time of the top league, but not quite there. And they're obviously kind of living between the sort of giants of Rangers and Celtic in Glasgow.
Football fans don't really make choices, do they? It's like you don't really choose who you fall in love with. I think that if you make, I suppose in Glasgow, you're either Rangers or Celtic, or you're Partick Thistle. I'm sure I'm offending Queen's Park fans there, but there aren't really that many of them, so that's fine. I don't know. I don't know. I think if I'd made a conscious choice to follow Thistle, then it would, you'd probably question my allegiance to them in a way. It's sort of like following a team sort of happens by accident. It's like, how do you fall in love with your partner? You just see them and somehow it happens. So it's a bit more like that. But one of the things I appreciate about Partick Thistle, obviously, that, as everybody who lives in Scotland knows, that the sectarian partisan thing is something that can wear on you a little bit and isn't always that positive. And when you follow Thistle, it's that isn't an issue, so that's nice. But then I think that, there's something really nice about supporting a really small team. And it wasn't until I left Scotland. I mean, I grew up in England, but I moved here when I was still a teenager. And I guess it wasn't until I left Scotland in my late 40s that I sort of started to understand what England was like. And I had to sort of reconnect with my English roots in a way. And then also started to understand what football was about, what lower league football was about, and where the Scottish leagues were in comparison to the English leagues. For example, I go and watch a team in Brighton, where I live. I live between Brighton and a little village in East Devon with my wife since we left in 2015. I left Glasgow. and I go and watch a little team called Whitehawk, who are currently in the 7th tier of English football. And it's quite remarkable how much money there is in English football, even in the lower leagues, whereby I went to see Whitehawk play Dulwich Hamlet in London on Saturday, and there's 3,500 at that game, which is extraordinary, which is more than there were, quite significantly more than there were at Hampden Park watching Queen's Park against Partick Thistle. So it's one assumes that professional football, as you know, Partick Thistle is a professional football club, you know, something that is comparable in other parts of the world. But it's extraordinary that Partick Thistle is run on such a shoestring, and that supporting a team like that, where you start to understand that just by going, you're supporting that team, and by buying your season ticket, you're supporting that team, and by buying your pies there, you're supporting that team. It's nice because you feel that, whereas when you go and watch I guess if you go and watch Rangers or Celtic, or if you watch a Premier League football club in England, your presence doesn't really matter. You know, they don't really care about you, and the match day experience isn't really very nice. But at a club like Partick Thistle, you feel that your contribution to the club is vital. And if you don't, you know, at the time when I did Kingsley, I sort of got involved with the club a bit and met the board and the chairman, and Ian Maxwell was there at the time running the club. And so I got a real insight into just the economics of running the club. And it made me realize how important your role as a fan is to a club like that.
I saw Kingsley the other night. We were at Partick Thistle versus Wraith Rovers. I made the mistake on air of referring to Kingsley as a he, David. And back in 2015, did you assign Kingsley a gender?
Well, Kingsley was based on the corporate logo of the sponsor at the time, which was called Kingsford Capital. And they're a hedge fund, which is a very strange type of company, way of doing business. Like, I don't really know. I didn't know anything about that world of high finance until I met the guy, Mike Wilkins. Mike Wilkins is a really interesting guy, really nice guy, and, you know, not one of these people who's destroyed the world economy, I don't think, but a great patron of the arts and of culture and stuff. But basically they only have 6 clients or something for the club. So their corporate identity is almost like a placeholder. So it was just a rising sun, and it was almost something that they just found on the internet, because you don't really need a corporate identity if you've only got 6 clients. So anyway, it's just this rising sun. So that's what Kingsley is based on, a rising sun, and not a sort of weird version of Lisa Simpson, as some people have suggested. And so anyway, I
wanted to get into that inspiration of Kingsley. So it really came from that quite generic corporate logo.
Yeah, it was. So in that sense, I say he because Craig is the person who occupies the Kingsley costume at the moment. He should be a they, because he's the sun, or a sun, a star, celestial body. I don't really know. I think he is a he because Craig is a he. Yeah.
He certainly seems to rock that kilt.
He does.
Regardless.
He does. I have to give a shout out to my friend Susie Hunter, who created the costume for Kingsley. Susie, a very talented fabric sculptor who lives in Glasgow, an old friend from art school. So she's made several costumes for Kingsley, because they don't wear that well, being bright yellow. They do soil and have to be repaired. So he's evolved as well. He's become a bit more technically sophisticated structurally, and he's tailor-made for Craig's fine physique. So shout out to Susie and to Craig.
How proud are you of Kingsley, David? Because I'm interested in your thoughts on the reaction Kingsley had back in 2015 as well. And I'm also interested in the reaction Partick Thistle had when you presented the idea of Kingsley, because it very much changed the face of mascotry, if you like, in football.
Mascotry. Is that the term?
If that's
it is
the
a
word.
term now. Well, I'm flattered that you think that. Again, it happened all by accident. So very briefly, the story is that I met this guy, Mike Wilkins, when I was doing an exhibition in California. And he was sponsoring a museum exhibition that I did. And we ended up having dinner and talking about football. And he'd been in London for a year, become interested, taking his son to soccer in London. Tottenham Hotspur. That was great, David. And anyway, I started talking to him about Partick Thistle, about the vagaries of being a football fan and football in Glasgow and whatnot. And then he sort of came back to me and said, "Do you think I could sponsor the team?" And I was like, "Yes, I think you could," knowing that Mike's finances were extraordinarily healthy. So he just phoned up and he spoke to Ian Maxwell. He just phoned up the club and spoke to Ian Maxwell. Ian Maxwell got in touch with me and said, "Is this real? A guy from California has just called me and asked to sponsor the club." And I was like, "Yes, it is real, and he does want to do it." So, and it was on the terms of it where that I would do all the artwork for it, and the mascot was kind of Mike's idea, really. So I just did as I was told, and obviously I was doing it as a fan because I was like, well, if we get X £100,000, I think it was an attractive offer, albeit not huge. It changed the club a bit, It gave us a competitive advantage, and it was at a time when we were just about to be promoted, had just been promoted, and it was, it was extraordinary. And I used to go, and I didn't tell any of my friends that this was happening until it was unveiled. So I kept it under wraps, and then all of a sudden, I was on Sky Sports News, which was like, wow, man. I mean, I've been interviewed in The Guardian about exhibitions and stuff, but being on Sky Sports News, that was special, because I'm one of those people who just sits at home and watches Sky Sports News all the time. I should be working. So, it was extraordinary.
Can I ask you about Kingsley? Obviously, you talked about the Sun logo, but there's also the facial expression, and he's just got this kind of facial expression and this aura of sort of disruptiveness or something going on. How would you sum it up, David? What were you going for?
I think I did a few versions of it, and I passed them to Mike Wilkins, and I think he went for the most angsty one that I'd done. So I think it's sort of a look of angst. I mean, yeah, we suffer a lot of angst, don't we, when you're 2-0 down at half-time to Queen's Park. I think it's angst.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes complete sense. And then when you presented Kingsley to Ian Maxwell and others at Partick Thistle, what was their immediate reaction? Because obviously this is probably blowing apart everyone's preconceptions of what mascots had been in the past, which tended to be cuddly sort of woodland creatures in sort of shabby suits.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is a story. The original, before the corporate sponsors, I think Jackie McBee was a bee. He was part of some corporate sponsorship before. And but the original mascot was a parrot whose name I can't recall at the moment. But the story goes that basically they wanted a mascot, and that was the cheapest one in the costume shop. So that was the one that was bought.
Brilliant! I love that.
That's the story. So yeah, it was just a purely economic decision to have a parrot, because everybody would say. I did remember at the time thinking, why is it a parrot? What's that got to do with Mary Hill? I've seen many parrots in Mary Hill, but anyway, the look on Ian Maxwell's face was similar to the permanent look on Kingsley's face. Actually, it's just like, what is going on? Why is it? I mean, Ian Maxwell was like, "It's fine. Look, David, it's fine. You've brought this guy on board, and he's sponsoring the club, and that's great. And I'm just going to go with it." And it's everything you say.
Brilliant. Money talks, as it so often does. Fantastic. In fact, speaking of Ian Maxwell, he is, of course, now the chief executive of the Scottish FA.
Yeah.
Scotland are going to Euro 2024. Has he been in touch yet about perhaps a mascot for the Scotland team for this summer?
Well, he hasn't, no, but and he's a very busy man, I'm sure, these days. I don't know. I think you can only do one mascot, really, can't you, in your life? It would feel like betraying Kingsley, and if I did another mascot, I am kind of a mascot guy now. Like, I get asked about mascots, and I have other friends who are mascots. I've got a friend who goes to my local team in Brighton, Whitehawk, called Marion, who strangely enough is from Mary Hill. Marion dresses as a lobster. And again, she took the original idea, I guess, the same train of thought as Partick Thistle's parrot. Like she just went to a costume shop and there happened to be a lobster available. And she just shows up every week dressed as a lobster. So I've sort of, I've become, when there is a conference about mascots, I probably will be invited to talk about them. And I've met some other mascots. I used to, I go and watch Exeter City now and again when I'm in Devon. And there's a lion and who used to sit next to me at Exeter. And then I'm on my travels. I did an exhibition in Guadalajara once, and they insisted that I meet the mascot of Chivas, which is a goat, a very scary looking goat. So I'm sort of a person who knows about mascots.
But you feel that your artistic mascot creative well has run dry, or rather, you don't want to upset Kingsley, basically.
No, I don't want to upset Kingsley. I mean, he and I are inextricably linked. And I feel that it's a job for another artist, perhaps.
That's fascinating, I think, mascots. I'm not sure when Arbroath came up with their smoky mascot, which is basically a smoked haddock that wanders around the pitch now at championship matches. But I like the fact it's quite anarchic, and I wondered if it was inspired by Kingsley as well. Anyway, that's probably a topic for someone else another day. You're wearing a Jimmy Kimmel hoodie, David.
Yeah.
He's a big name in the US chat show circuit, and clearly you've been on it. What was that like?
Oh gosh, man, it was one of those moments where you're like, what am I doing here on Jimmy Kimmel? Well, it turns out Jimmy Kimmel's a fan of mine. I think his daughter's an artist, and maybe she put him onto me, and he owns some of my work. And then I was doing some publicity for a book that was published by an American publisher, and we got the call, do you want to go on Jimmy Kimmel? And I was like, well, yeah, I guess, So yeah, I was in Hollywood on Jimmy Kimmel. All my friends were like texting me the next day, and they were like, you were on Jimmy Kimmel. How? What? Why? How did that happen? That is so strange. And it was, I don't know, just one of those things, but it was quite nerve-wracking. I mean, it's rather different from, obviously the Scottish Football Podcast is a bigger honour.
Massive, yes.
But it is also something where I actually have something to say about a subject that I'm passionate about. It's almost like I sort of know more about football than I do about art. Well, at least I've got more to say about football. So yeah, strange times. And yeah, I don't normally wear this. I'm sort of wearing I'm in my house attire, shall we say, at the moment, because I'm speaking to you via the internet. So the internet is strong in my apartment here in Brighton.
Fantastic. I want to return to Partick Thistle in just a moment, David. I noticed you are also hugely respected by Andy Murray as well. In fact, I was reading an article, when the two of you got together, actually, I think it was for the Financial Times, actually, because he, in his Cromlix House hotel complex, has lots of your artwork up there as well. He's clearly a huge fan. Was that a surprise to you? Or, how did you get to know about that? And are you a big fan of Andy Murray?
Yeah, Andy Murray's a hero of all of us, really, not just in Scotland, but in the whole of the UK. And I think it's just, to meet him, he's one of those sportsmen who have done it, and he's done the thing that nobody did, which was to win a major, but also to win Wimbledon twice. We watched tennis for years and years and never thought it would happen. And Andy actually did it. So he is genuinely a legend, a sporting legend. So yeah, it was sort of a bit out of the blue. I think I did know that he'd collected some work and that he bought some work, but it was really great to meet him. And that place, Cromlix, is so nice. Me and Kim, my wife, and the dog, we were invited up for a couple of days, and it was lovely. If you want to take your other half for a romantic weekend, I heartily recommend it. Food is great, the location is great, and you can take the dog. And they made my dog breakfast. The dog was like in heaven as well. And Andy...
And Andy and Kim personally made your dog breakfast?
I don't think Andy made it. No, the chef made it. But yeah, it was lovely. And Andy was so really nice guy, really interested, really intrigued, and really great to talk to. And we had dinner with Judy as well, which was really interesting. And she was telling us all about the Scottish Tennis Centre, which is her kind of legacy project, I guess. And yeah, amazing. I mean, both of them really fascinating to talk to, really fascinating. And
did you have a similar offbeat sense of humour, David? And I've only just met you, but I'm kind of going by your artwork generally that you probably do. And it seems to me that Andy's kind of got that as well. Was that something that gelled?
Yeah, he's definitely got a sense of humour. I think you have to have a sense of humour to go through life as he has. You have to laugh at things that happen to you. He's a smart guy and very thoughtful guy, but I wouldn't swap my life for his. I'll tell you that. I mean, we were in the hotel and then guests started coming in for lunch and people saw him and it was like they'd seen a unicorn or something. And we're like, Andy, it's you. And like, yeah, can we just take the photograph? And then, but he was so sweet as well, so nice to everybody, had time for everybody.
But it gets like that for you sometimes, does it not, David? Because I've heard that sometimes folk come up to you and ask for you to do some sort of artwork on their bodies so that they can then go away later and have it then tattooed onto their bodies. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right. That is weird. That's a thing that happened, another thing that happened to me in my life. And it's always like 25-year-old young, beautiful young women with beautiful young skin. I'm like, are you sure you want me to do this? And they're like, yeah, will you draw an owl on my on my arm? And like, look, I'll draw an owl on your arm, but I advise you not to have it tattooed. I'm going to have it tattooed on. I'm going to do it right now. And I carry a sterile pen around with me, like the one that surgeons use to draw on their patients before they operate on them. And I draw the owl. Fortunately, Andy Murray didn't ask for me to draw anything on him. So that was good. But yeah, it's a strange old life that I'm living, put it that way.
I want to talk to you about your music just very briefly as well. I know this is completely off-piste and nothing to do with football, but I listened to Dinosaur Boy last night.
Oh, right. Dinosaur Egg.
Dinosaur Egg, sorry. Yes, and it was with Lord Stornoway.
Well, yeah. Lord Stornoway, a.k.a. Ian Shaw, is a good pal of mine who lives in Glasgow, originally from Stornoway. And we have this ongoing musical collaboration where I write lyrics and he interprets them in a sort of very sort of acoustic guitar singer-songwriter kind of way. He's got a really beautiful voice and he's a really great musician. So we've made a few tracks over the years and we did an album. What's it called? I can't remember now. You can find it on Spotify. And I have to say it's quite listenable too, but it's not really because of my contribution. It's because Ian's quite an extraordinary musician. And the lyrics are, as you'd expect from me. It's had a few, I mean, weirdly, another weird thing that happened to me is that I get all these royalties from the lyrics that I've written because I've done quite a few musical things over the years, just as a kind of side project. I mean, I used to play music when I was younger and was in bands and stuff in Glasgow, but I have no talent really at all. But so weirdly, well...
You're being harsh on yourself there, David. And I was thinking, if I can just jump in here, if you're not going to do a mascot for Scotland for Euro 2024, you could speak to Ian Maxwell about doing a song. A national team always needs a song.
I'll do that. I'd collaborate with Ian. I'll get onto him after this. And we definitely have a stab at that. But anyway, I get royalties from my song because, you know, if you've written the lyrics to something, you get a royalty, mechanical royalties. And I get some of my songs from quite a long time ago have been used on TV and stuff. It's really strange. So I've got quite a few £1,000 from like a song that I did that was in some TV show in America. Parenthood, is that a TV show? And then there was an advert for Radio Shack. It's a very unexpected revenue source, put it that way. But it's a thing. And another.
Tell you what, if the Tartan Army get behind your song for Euro 2024, I'm sure that would be a very lucrative revenue stream as well. Actually.
I'm not in it for the money.
No, I know.
I'm not in it for the money. I'm in it for the glory.
Oh, brilliant. I could talk to you all day, David. I know you're a busy man. I just want to kind of finish off by asking you about Partick Thistle's season. A fight is on for them to be in the playoff spots this season in this crazy championship league. Do you get a chance to watch much of the football at the moment?
I try my best. I've only been to one game in the flesh this season. I've only been to Fair Hill, which is something Brighton that's really difficult. But yeah, I mean, I'm not the best person to talk to about, who's actually playing well, because I think when you're just reading match reports and seeing highlights, and I guess when you televised games, you get a sense of what's happening. But I think the difference is, the problem has always been for Thistle that they're just not scoring goals, I suppose. And Brian Graham seems to have provided that for us in recent seasons, and we do seem to be able to score. It's just, I suppose it's like everything. It's just putting your chances away, really, isn't it? And that's been less of a frustration in recent seasons. But I think we'll get to the playoffs. It's just that when you've got 6 games in the playoffs, you're like, how? And then you might end up playing Aberdeen in the final.
That's right.
Like it's so weighted towards the team that are basically in the playoff spot in the Premiership. I feel like it's getting to the playoffs. It's not like getting to the playoffs in the Championship in England, for example, where you do feel that you've genuinely got a chance.
I've got to ask you, what was your mood like at the end of last season in that incredible Ross County match?
Oh, chance! Goal! George Harman volleys it home, and Ross County have sensationally come back from the dead to force extra time in this playoff final. They were all back down. They were doomed, but suddenly, with one volleyed finish from the substitute Harman, Partick Thistle hearts are broken, and Ross County have given them...
While I was watching it on telly, I had an invitation from Craig, aka Kingsley, to go, but there's no way I could go up to Dingwall just to watch football. My wife wouldn't have been very happy. But anyway, I watched it at home, and the dog went and hid upstairs, put it that way, and didn't come down for 2 hours until I'd calmed down. That was extraordinary. I mean, it's a cliche that all football fans think, oh, this is what we always do, to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. But that was extraordinary. 3 goals up with 20 minutes to go, was it? It was unbelievable. I mean, it almost made me laugh through the tears. How amazingly efficiently we managed to mess it up. And it was almost like watching, I don't know, it was like watching a car crash or something.
Josh Sims is going to take, yeah, it sure is. Josh Sims to win the playoff final for County and keep them in the top flight, right-footed, and he's done it! He's done it! Josh Sims is the hero for Ross County, who somehow, from somewhere, have stayed in the Premiership and have denied Partick Thistle in the penalty shootout. One of the greatest comebacks in Scottish football history, you would have to say. Complete.
Hence the angst on Kingsley's face.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a distant memory now, and maybe, who knows? Maybe we'll go back there. You never know. It
was one of the best games of last season from a purely neutral perspective, but I'm glad I wasn't a Partick Thistle fan, I have to say.
Yeah.
Great stuff. David, I'll talk to you all day. I'll be interested in your projects coming up, but I think we've established that you must now start work on a Scotland anthem for Euro 2024. About to phone Ian Maxwell, I'm sure. And good luck with that.
I'll wait for the call.
Great stuff, David. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
My pleasure. Cheers, John.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. All the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.